Picking up where we left off last week, the Doctor and her companions are saved from a gory death by a ship that jumps out of hyperspace and separates the group. Regardless of their circumstances, the two ships that jumped out of hyperspace end up crashing on the planet below named Desolation. And after a quick reunion, they're joined by two space racers named Angstrom, played by Susan Lynch, and Epso, played by Sean Dooley. With the race being fronted up by Art Malak-Zillan, these two are in a race for a considerable amount of money if they can race across the planet's surface and make it to an ancient finish marker that the planet's inhabitants call the Ghost Monument. The Ghost Monument in question being the TARDIS, and thus setting up our stakes where the Doctor, Ryan, Graham and Yasmin have to race to the Ghost Monument before nightfall. Well, that didn't take long before the Chris Chibnall plot timer .trademark came into play, but then again, facetiousness aside, let's get into the strengths of the episode. Well, first of all, there's this scene.
See this? The new Shinikido. Shall I let go?
Which I'd like to think is a nice little reference to this moment in survival.
One finger can be a deadly weapon.
Right off the bat, one thing I will say about this episode is that it definitely works much better into Chris Chibnall's strengths. Most notably in the characterization for both Angstrom and Epso. Epso embodies the philosophy of trust nobody and always look after number one, and it's delivered quite succinctly when he tells everybody a story about him and his mother when he was just 4 years old, where she told him to climb up a tree as high as he could and instructed him to jump down with the promise that she'd catch him.
So I jumped, smashed into the ground, and she stood over me and she said, "Now you've learned. You can never trust anyone."
And, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the runner-up for the Mother of the Year award right behind Rose de Silva from Silent Hill. Contrasting that with Angstrom's backstory, who's given a much more sympathetic angle to work with in wanting to win the prize money so that she can help her impoverished family live in relative comfort. And tell me, dear children, can you spot the moral of the episode? I'll give you a clue, it's about
The real superpower of teamwork!
I wish I was joking when I played that clip, but that's pretty much the Ghost Monument in a nutshell. But to the episode's credit, while the theming is cheesy in places, I do think it manages to hit a sweet spot where it's more endearing than it is preachy. The biggest case of which being with Graham and Ryan's relationship, as around the middle of the episode, Graham continues to keep Ryan encouraged despite his clear unease over his step-granddad.
See, I cope myself by asking a question: if Grace was here, what would she say? Now she'd be going, "What's the matter with you? You're on another planet, how cool is that?"
That being said though, in this very scene, it did kind of make me take Ryan's character down a little bit when Graham's clearly trying to make the best of a bad situation and keep Ryan encouraged. Meanwhile, Ryan seems to coldly dismiss Graham's help. I mean, Ryan's attitude isn't entirely unfounded since family relationships are often a very complicated and tumultuous pain in the ass to deal with, but as it stands, I have no idea why the hell Ryan's being so utterly despondent to Graham's paternal affections.
I'm not a kid.
Well, I was hoping you'd say, "I'm gonna look out for you too."
Now, you could argue that this is because of Grace's death and that Ryan is merely repressing the emotional trauma by shutting himself away from other people, but I don't think that entirely excuses his behaviour considering the fact that, for as brief as it was, Graham was still her husband. Oh, and not to mention, the two of you are on an alien planet. Whatever hatchet that you have with Graham, I think you can put to one side for the sake of survival, so Ryan, for the love of Rassilon, stop being such a goddamn bitch.
Sorry.
Keep in mind though, this isn't a deal breaker just yet, but my view of Ryan is really starting to plummet here, and Chris Chibnall better give me a damn good reason why, because Ryan's being so goddamn petty over somebody who is otherwise a very sweet man. And I really mean that because Graham for me was the highlight of the episode. Whether it be him sticking up for the TARDIS crew or telling Epso to shut his gob, Graham's character I think really shines in this episode, making him my favourite companion of the series so far. He's a character that I think very much benefited from the development that Grace's death had given him, and plus with the talk that he had with Ryan earlier, because Graham chooses to apply himself and make a stand in situations that he otherwise would have previously shied away from, he's got a good head on his shoulders, and as a result of everybody else here, I'd say he's by far the most endearing of the TARDIS crew this season. Yasmin on the other hand, not so much. She's definitely had her backstory fleshed out slightly, given her reminiscence of both her dad and her sister in a brief conversation she had with Angstrom. But other than that though, Yasmin still has a major ways to go before she leaves an impact in the same way that Graham has.
That's quite some achievement.
Moving swiftly on, the group come across an abandoned settlement that they quickly come to discover is hostile and filled with abandoned androids left behind by the people who lived there, leading to a scene that's both funny, while at the same time a point of contention for me.
It's time to stop messing about.
What are you doing?
Fighting back.
No. Guns, never use them.
Call of Duty, man. I've trained for this. See, that's what I'm talking about! That's how you do things! Where's the reload? Where's the reload?
You see, this is the funniest part of the episode for me. But here's the negative point. It circles back to the more tiresome parts of New Who with the whole guns don't solve problems or violence begets violence spiel that was laced throughout the Tennant and Smith eras. And it's not like I don't agree with the Doctor in this case, I do, I'm on her side in this, but as someone who's seen the classic series, I can't help but compare scenes like this...
Guns, never use them.
...to scenes like this. And yes, I know the whole Time War and the "you would make a good Dalek" sentiment from both Eccleston and Capaldi's eras play a factor into the new series Doctors, but this leads into my second problem with this scene.
The answer was on the floor, you just reached for the wrong thing. Electromagnetic pulse. Basically fried the systems. Brains beat bullets.
So you not only knew that there was a fully functional EMP on the ground, but you also let Ryan run off guns blazing, fully aware that these super accurate sniper robots could have easily given him a few extra breathing holes.
That is messed up.
Putting the hypocrisy to one side for a second, the Doctor was fully willing to let a guy afflicted with dyspraxia run off like a complete dumbass without once saying, "Hey Ryan, you don't need to do that. I found this EMP device on the floor that'll knock him all out in one fell smash." Oh, well, what didn't you say? But no, instead you let this complete numbnuts run across the battlefield doing his best Leroy Jenkins impression, and for what? To teach him a lesson? And I'm sorry, but for a Doctor born out of kindness to never be cruel, never be cowardly, this entire scene makes the Doctor out to be some sort of prick for letting Ryan do something so utterly stupid.
Thank you, I aim to please.
Anyway, the group descend into the inner sanctum where they come across a message left behind by the inhabitants. It reveals that they were forced to create weapons of mass destruction, leaving their planet decimated by storms and their water undrinkable given the molecules that eat through flesh. But the biggest point to note about all this is that the creatures that were behind their enslavement were known as the Stentor, as in the very same species that Tim Shaw originated from. Which does make me wonder if the Stentor are going to be something of a running series arc for Series 11. I mean, not to jump the gun, but knowing what we're in for next week, does that implicate that... You know what? Forget it. Let's just push that to one side for now. Then again, there's also a mention by one of the remnants about the Doctor being something called a timeless child, which does have me curious. Part of me is wondering if it's going to connect to the whole the Doctor being the other mystery that was touched upon in Lungbarrow, or if it's going to be some sort of contrived mystery, the likes of which putting the hybrid story arc from Series 9 to shame in being a complete convoluted mess. Or maybe it's an attempt at pseudo-psychology like Russell had at the end of Time with the Doctor's mum? His first wife? Landlady? Anyway, the solution to dealing with the remnants is actually a rather creative one, and something that I wish the new series did more often. Given the presence of acetylene in the air, Graham uses Epso cigar to ignite the air and destroy the remnants in a big ball of flame, which allows for the Doctor and her gang to escape despite being surrounded once they got outside. I was honestly kind of taken aback by this, because had this been an episode by Russell or Moffat, they would have just used the sonic screwdriver to do some space magic and let the Doctor run away. As the sun rises and the group makes it to the location of the Ghost Monument, and after Epso learns
The real superpower of teamwork!
He and Angstrom claim a joint prize. But as a result of their victory, the Doctor and her gang are left stranded on the planet without a means of getting off. However, because we're still 2 episodes into Series 11 and we have 8 episodes left to go, the TARDIS rematerializes and we get to see that she's done some redecorating. I don't like it. The interior harkens back towards a mixture between Eccleston's console room with a darker steampunk-influenced Matt Smith-era control scheme. Oh, and it also dispenses biscuits for some reason. Design-wise, I think it's okay. Nothing to me will ever beat out Capaldi's interior from Series 9, given that it was equal parts an alien ship, but at the same time also a very warm, homely space that feels very lived in. But that being said, after giving Yasmin, Ryan and Graham a quick rundown on what the ship can do, she takes off into time and space, ending episode 2 of Series 11. Not really too much to talk about outside of the episode itself, however, I would be remiss to mention Sega Nakanola's rockin' music. This man is fast becoming one of my favourite Doctor Who composers of all time, right up there with the likes of Roger Lim, Paddy Kingsland and Dominic Glynn. Like last time, Sagan absolutely nails the atmospheric scenes where required a soundtrack is needed, but when things get action-packed, man do things get going with some fantastic music. That and anytime a soundtrack includes a heavy metal flourish when Ryan runs across the desert guns blazing will always get a smile from me. And now for final thoughts. While you might call the main plot a bit sparse and anorexically thin in places, it works to Chris Chibnall's strengths as a writer, and in doing so, it was able to give a sense of civilization thanks to characters like Angstrom and Epso, giving the viewer a taste of their universe even if we don't see that much of it. And while some characters do develop better than others, this episode I think is worth watching for Graham alone, but that being said, I do have a few concerns going forward. I really hope that Ryan's whole I'm not gonna call you granddad character arc isn't gonna be dragged out over the course of the series, because his behaviour in this episode is downright atrocious atrocious at certain points.
Don't go on about it.
That and a little bit more character development for Yasmin would be nice too.
Definitely.
Other than that though, I don't really see this episode being fondly remembered in the grand scheme of things in Doctor Who history, but at the same time, you could do much worse, so if you're looking for something decent to watch on Monday night, then I think the Ghost Monument will serve that purpose quite well. Well, on that non-controversial note, I am Solidus-Skully, keep it new metal, and... Isn't it that things get a little bit more ominous in here? That's fantastic. I'm sure nothing will ever go wrong.